Hello and welcome to this Safe Deposits session. My name is Alan Partridge and I'm the Marketing Manager here at Safe Deposits Scotland. It's July, so we thought we would take this opportunity to mark another anniversary for Safe Deposits Scotland. As you may be aware, tenancy deposit protection came into enforcement in July 2012, and that's when Safe Deposits Scotland started operations as well, so it is our birthday. Back in 2012, lots was going on. London was gearing up to host the Olympic Games that year, and number one in the charts was will.i.am and Eva Simons with This Is Love. So those were among the highlights of that year. But as I say, here in Glasgow, much was going on with the introduction of Safe Deposits Scotland, and one of the people very heavily involved with that and with us in this journey right up until today was Nick Hankey, the Group Managing Director for Scotland at the TDS Group. Welcome, Nick, and thank you for joining us today. So Nick, I guess a lot of people watching today may be familiar with you, particularly if they work in the private rented sector and will have encountered you at industry events over the years. But for anybody who's not familiar, could you perhaps introduce yourself and explain your role as Group MD?
Okay. So when Safe Deposits started, it was very important that it was a Glasgow-based organisation with a front-facing thing. To give customers a very much a Scottish flavour, and that was what we did right at the very beginning. So Mike Smith, who I think everybody will know, is our face of Safe Deposits, and I'm sort of the man behind that. So I'm technically employed by TDS, but my job as Group MD is really to bring together all the strands of the service that we provide. So in Glasgow we have our forward-facing contact centre, customer relations, charity marketing. The initial part of the ADR process all takes here, and we have friendly people that our customers know and love who do that. In Hemel Hempstead, I've got a team of people who do the finance, which is the allocation of deposits, the paying out of deposits, payroll and all that sort of thing. We have an IT function down there, and we have adjudicators all over the United Kingdom, several in Scotland, several who actually started work here as, some of them actually as vacation students who've come on. And my job is to make sure that all of those people deliver excellent customer service and deliver the KPIs to the government, and also the service level agreement to make sure that everybody's doing what they should do. So I'll pull all of that together.
So lots of moving parts there.
A lot of moving parts, yeah.
And so you've been here for the whole journey so far. What difference do you think Safe Deposits Scotland has made in these 12 years so far?
So right at the beginning, it was the coming together of the people behind Safe Deposits, which was RICS, Property Mark and Scottish Association of Landlords, working with TDS together. And initially we also had SCVO, NUS Scotland, Shelter and Citizens Advice Bureau. So it was bringing together a lot of people in the property sector, and I think that legitimised what the legislation was going to be. There'd been quite a campaign before saying that things here were actually well controlled and we didn't need it, but I know Sal in particular were really keen to embrace the legislation and make the most of it and put together an organisation that would be friendly. So that helped inform where we went from there. So what we've seen is a big increase in standards. So when we first started, very few check-ins and check-outs and that sort of thing. There wasn't the PRT, so people had all sorts of tenancy agreements, and people weren't really competent in dealing with things. There was also very much a feeling that it was the landlord's money, where in fact it's always been the tenant's money, and that of course is one of the reasons for the legislation. In 2011-2012, Rebecca Johnston, Malcolm Lindo and Alison McDougall did a series of events around Scotland called the Dark Arts of Adjudication, which I think took away part of the mystery of what people were worried about with the legislation. And we've continued to really do that by going out training for adjudication and other things as well, which means the whole professionalism, I think, has come with a little bit more legislation and regulation, but we've done it, I hope, in a nice way with good customer service and improved standards.
Yeah, that's Excellent. And as you say there, those workshops continue to this day. Our
Yeah,
ADR team are out and about
absolutely.
around Scotland
Yeah.
later this summer into the autumn. So,
Yeah.
so that's clearly safe deposits has, and indeed tenancy deposit protection in general has brought changes to the sector. Within safe deposits itself, what would you say have been the big changes over the past?
The biggest change is technology, and you mentioned the London Olympics and that sort of thing. I just had my first Apple iPhone, and I think that has really transformed a lot of the way business is done. I gave up my BlackBerry and became an Apple iPhone, which that sort of big leap and the way that things have been empowered since then has changed enormously. So when we started in July 2012, there was the excitement of the first payment which came through by backs, but we literally had rooms of shoeboxes filled with cheques that we were taking to the bank because everybody was by cheque. The postage was enormous. There were bags of cheques coming in. There were bags of letters going out to say that things had been protected, and that continued for quite a while actually. And I think part of I can remember speaking to people and saying, well, have you booked an EasyJet flight? Because you need to have an email to do that. And this is a bit like EasyJet. It's an IT-based system. And the system we put in was supposed to be all very non-manual, high-tech. But I think people weren't actually there in 2012. It was, it sounds ridiculous. It's only 12 years ago, but it was a bit of a, shock to people, technology-wise, to deal with all these things there. So technology has been a huge change, and I think we saw that, and with COVID as well, that certain agents weren't able to forward their calls and were on manual records, whereas now we hear about people managing their business from an iPad, driving around, being on the move. Every meeting we had to be in person. In that first year before, when the legislation came out and we had all these meetings setting up safe deposits, there was this constant flying up and down because there were conference calls by phone, but people felt they had to be there. And I think Teams has changed that. So Teams has also, and working from home has given people an opportunity. So instead of us being up here in Glasgow doing just Scottish things, we've been able to progress people. So I mentioned earlier the adjudicators who are home-based moved across. But we now have a variety of people working for Scotland, the English scheme or the Northern Ireland scheme in different offices around the UK, or from home, and that sort of technology and expertise is incredible. I remember in August 2019 being shown by our IT that we've got this fabulous new thing called Teams. I thought, well, we'll never use that. But that has actually transformed. So the big thing to me really is technology that has changed completely. And the other thing is there's been an embracing of the legislation. So you don't see this things so much as you did in the early days about it's my money, it's not their money. Although I remember we had a very interesting thing when I was chasing up at the beginning. A lot of people registered and didn't give us the money, and that was also computer issue. But I rang them up and they said, oh, the hall needed replacing, the floor needed replacing. I said, oh, at the house you're renting out? Oh no, my house. And there were stories like that at the beginning which have faded away. Mm-hmm. And we also had the whole thing, we say the missing millions, which was people who just weren't engaged. And I think the whole PRT thing and safe deposits being very part of the educational process at that point, embracing with local authorities and things, really helped us get people in. So now I think there are still people out there that disengage totally from the process for tax planning reasons, I'll say politely, but generally I think there's a lot more compliance with the legislation in all areas.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Excellent. And it's interesting you mentioned there COVID-19, it's something that's ingrained in everybody's memory now. I mean, the last 12 years that we keep referring to, on a global sense for the world, it has been a roller coaster, but nothing has affected every single person more than that has. There's not one of our customers, be that tenants, landlords or letting agents, there's not one of our colleagues that was not impacted in some way by that. How did you find that Safe Deposits kind of responded to the pandemic?
We were very lucky in two ways. One, my staff here are resilient, they're self-starting, and they're very adaptable. And we pressed the button, and magically the disaster recovery plan went into motion. And we even had 2 new starters, David Morgan and Frankie Bishop, who subscribers will know. They were trained in a bubble. They went into a bubble with a manager each to be trained, and I thought the flexibility from people like that right at the beginning showed a total different way of thinking and doing things. And again, it was the embracement of teams and that sort of thing. But where we were lucky, in inverted commas, was that TDS had an office fire in 2019, which we recovered from very quickly. We were up and running in under 21 hours after the fire. But that informed things that we did here. So we'd recently replaced the computer systems, so we put that into blue box storage, and everybody had a computer they could take home, because not everybody had a computer at home in those days. Now everybody's got laptops, and we've moved it again another step forward, and mobility is much more important, and that sort of has come out of COVID. But it meant we could get people up and running really quickly, so it was seamless. The team here, I love Glaswegians because you're very caring people here, but there was lovely social things. We had virtual quizzes, we had virtual cocktail evenings and all these sort of things, which really kept people involved and kept the team spirit going, because what I was worried about was we had a very close-knit team, and I was worried we were getting new people in who'd never actually physically met other people, and it was to keep that spirit going, which I think we were able to do, and we have been able to do even now when we're in hybrid working going afterwards. And the big thing was helping our customers who didn't have the technology or had been locked out of their offices. We had people who were being turned away by the police and they were trying to go to their offices and this sort of thing, and helping them through what was a very difficult crisis. The other thing was the 28-day notice, which was really a bit of a roller coaster, because we invest our money for the long term to maximise interest rates, and obviously interest rates were much lower then as well. All of a sudden, a lot of students decided, I'm going home to mum, gave 28 days notice, and we had 6 weeks of monitoring the cash every single day just to make sure that we had enough cash to keep things going, because it could have ended up being a rush on the scheme. But thankfully, in May 2020, things began to open up a bit. And I think a lot of agents, thanks to the various things that were put in place, like furlough, that actually ended up with more cash at the end of that first little bit than they went into. And the resilience was there, and we came out fine. So it was scary times, but we made it, and I think we're stronger for it in a way.
Yeah, this is it. Like I say, it almost seems like a kind of a nightmare that never happened.
I wouldn't want to do it again.
And it's no, at all. Certainly, I was I was only here about a year and a half when it happened. So for me, it was like a defining moment in my career here at Safe Deposits. Coming back to a point we've kind of touched on a couple of times when I introduced you, and you'd also mentioned about what had happened at the office in Hemel Hempstead with regards to the fire there, which obviously triggered our or kind of renewed our disaster planning up here in Glasgow. Safe Deposits Scotland is part of the TDS group, and this is something that perhaps our customers will have noticed a little more in terms of branding and so on in recent years. Can you explain to us, for anyone who's not familiar, about the group and about Safe Deposits' place in that?
So TDS started in 2003, and it was set up by Arla, as it was then, now Property Mark, and RICS, initially as a trial company to inform the government in decisions about setting up the deposit scheme in England and Wales. And there was a voluntary scheme that was run, an arbitration adjudication scheme after with a key number of agents and people, and it did really well, and the legislation went through in 2004, and then 2007 they became an insurance-backed scheme. So that is different to Scotland, which is obviously custodial. Over time, in 2016, we got custodial as well. We opened Northern Ireland in 2013, and we do have the New Homes Ombudsman as well, and we've got one or two other little bits of things that we do. Scotland started in 2012. What happened in 2011 when the legislation came through was that John Blackwood of Sal contacted his friend Alan Ward at the RLA, who are the Residential Landlords Association in Manchester, who are now part of the NRLA, and said, this thing's happening in Scotland, we need somebody with a bit of knowledge. And Alan said, you need to speak to TDS. So that was how TDS got involved. And TDS provided the working capital, the intellectual property, the IT, nous, and initially, setting up the adjudications and all that sort of thing, and it was agreed that TDS would do the adjudication. That was partially to make it independent from SafeDeposits, so our adjudicators were all employed by TDS, and also do the finance function, again, for an internal control thing. So you've got people at the front dealing with our customers and other parties, and at the back you've got the drudgery going on, the tedious part of TDS, as I call it, but very, very important because it's about keeping people's money safe and adjudication decisions, and it's separate, and that was how things started off, with an agreement between SafeDeposits as an independent company limited by guarantee, whose money all goes to charity, with TDS as one of the members on there, and now currently the members are RICS, Property Mark, SAL and TDS. And over time, it became apparent that we needed to have somebody to join those things together. So 2016, I took over, and as I described, that's what I do. But by doing that, things got closer. So at the moment, we're on sort of the final stages of doing things like getting employment contracts the same across the whole of the UK. But branding, we've looked at to try and get a consistent approach there. But at the beginning, there was a lot of really good ideas in SafeDeposits that went down to TDS, and we realised that really we should be working together much closer across all of the legislative areas, and that's basically where SafeDeposits fits in. So, still an independent board, still giving our profits to charity, but it's this guiding light and the expertise of TDS, which sort of gets channeled through me and Mike.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. Yeah. So, obviously, our bread and butter, what we are here to do, and we take it very seriously, is the protection of deposits. We have followed the legislation and delivered for customers who must follow that legislation for the past 12 years. We've not sat still though. New things have happened. We've introduced new services across the years, such as SDS Resolve, our free mediation and conciliation service. You mentioned obviously about the work that's supported through our SafeDeposits Scotland Charitable Trust. More recently, the SafeDeposits Scotland Community Fund. What's next for SafeDeposits?
Well, to me, we've got a very limited window of high interest rates at the moment. As I mentioned earlier, we do invest for the long term. So of our portfolio, we can only invest a certain amount, I think, for this, but it gives us an opportunity to really increase our philanthropic giving and to also do things in communities where our customers operate, which I think is very important, to try and get the headline of who is safe deposits. My ideal would always be that people don't protect a deposit, they safe deposit it. And I've heard that once or twice when we've been out of conferences, but I would really like us to be something that all, particularly tenants, understand that this is a really strong brand that gives them protection, and also obviously landlords and agents who actually give us the money, that they understand. So I think it's a really unique opportunity through the philanthropic side of the business to give better awareness, and perhaps spending more on marketing and things while we've got a bit of time to do that, just to get that final thing, because there are still, as I mentioned, deposits that haven't been protected, I'm sure, and it's just getting all of that in. Growth is still important. We operate in a sector that is a political hot potato. We've got people saying people are leaving in droves. We've got people saying new people are coming in droves. We know that the last year or so, the amount in total protection hasn't really changed much, but it's growing and making sure that we get these people in who aren't. And I think what we've seen perhaps is people with portfolios who hadn't protected and were operating outside the legislation have now got new people who've sold to new landlords who are better, and that perhaps is why over 2 or 3 years ago there has been an increase. There's also the whole build to let market. It's a really changing thing, and there's this but it's a political hot potato. There are intended consequences and unintended consequences of legislation, and it's navigating that. And I think that'll be a really interesting thing, not only after the election, but also the current political situation in Scotland at the moment. And I think things will go. And it is quite interesting to see where the parties are putting housing in their place. The other thing is making the most of technology. We've invested a huge amount in the new system. What I want to do is try and stop the tedious part of what people have in their jobs, the manual stuff, and have things much more intuitive. So the customers just get on and do it, which was what was always the plan in 2012. But it's easy for them to do, and it's a pleasure for them to do it that way. I know from when we go out and about, people like ringing us up and speaking to it, but sometimes it's easier just to get it done and over and done with. So I think artificial intelligence with a small a and a small I think will start informing things and making things better. But over time, I think we'll get much more out of our new system and be able to make people's jobs more interesting, and then they become more outward facing. The other thing is resolution, which you mentioned, which I think will become more and more of a thing going forward, and will really change the way that people think, because it is much easier to invest a bit of time at the beginning and for us to act as an intermediary and resolve something than wait for the adjudication when the tenant hasn't got the money or the landlord hasn't got the money, or it just makes things happen. And then finally, it's making the most of being part of the TDS group and taking the most that we can out of that to advance. There's huge opportunities for our colleagues, particularly with remote working, and on both sides of the border to get involved and collaborate and to grow things here in Glasgow.
So exciting times for everybody, for colleagues and customers alike. So we greatly appreciate you taking the time, Nick, to talk to us today. I think we'll finish with a reflective question here about, as I say, we're celebrating Safe Deposits 12th birthday. Any favourite memory or memories for you from this past 12 years?
Well, I've mentioned one was when I remember Malcolm Lindo ringing and saying he could not believe that the first bit of money had come in after all the planning and everything, and how quickly it grew, and hitting sort of 50% of the market really quickly was a great feeling. I think my favourite memories are our customers coming to me at the conferences and saying how brilliant my staff are and giving me such wonderful examples of things that we do really well, and I find that really rewarding. You know, in my role as Group MD, that I've got such great people working for me underneath. There's all sorts of things. The quiz that we did after COVID, where everybody was still separated, but at last we were seeing people again, I found that almost emotional, that we'd sort of got through it all together, and it was just so nice to see our customers again in familiar faces and see them face to face rather than being on the internet. The customer service, excellent accreditation was a great thing to do, and you were very much part of that the first time around, weren't you?
Yes, I was involved in that.
And that was a big feather in our cap, and I think that enabled us to relook at a lot of procedures and things in a different way, and carry on doing the good things that we do. One thing that in 2016 when I took over, I chatted to everybody, and the overwhelming theme was that people liked their job because they made a difference, because they went home and somebody had got something sorted out. And I think that is my memory, overwhelming memory of the last 12 years. We're having people who are really happy to sort people out and do things.
Yeah, no, it is evident every day working in the office here and overhearing the conversations that our colleagues have. Well, thank you again, Nick. It's been a pleasure speaking to you as always today, and thank you to everybody who's tuned in to watch this video here. If you have any comments or questions, please feel free to pop those on YouTube here, and we'll be happy to answer those for you. And if you like what you see, then please hit like as well. Thank you very much, and we'll see you again soon.
Thank you.